To Shri Shri Radha Shila Govinda Deva Prasthalabi Seva Manushamanami. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmani Taya Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Mangalang Bhagavan Vishnu Mangaravaya Go Brahmani Mangalam Panari Kaksho Mangaraya Tanohari. Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dhimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate. Om Mahadevi Cha Vidmahi Vishnu Padni Cha Dhimahi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate. Mahalakshmi Namastuvyam Sare Sare Hari Pare Namastuvyam Nayatire Tapta Kanchana Goringi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavana Sute Devi Pranamani Hari Pare. Namaom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pistaya Bhutade Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Shami Tanamane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauramani Pacharine Nirvishes Sanvari Praskada Desatarine. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. We're a little late getting on the air because for some reason the internet connection was not functioning. But finally, when I clicked on stream to Facebook after about 47 times, it finally made the connection. So here we are, the third in a series of shows we're presenting this week. Wisdom Wednesday. Earlier on the week, we talked about how the Lord uses unlimited power in wonderful ways. We cited the example of Aghasura, how he allowed the Aghasura demon to swallow his friends. And then he went into the mouth of Aghasura, following his friends, expanded himself, caused Aghasura to be unable to breathe, die of suffocation. He made Aghasura, who had been very polluted, full of noxious odors and all, made him sweet and aromatic, turned him into a playground for the children. This was cited as one example of austerity, amazing ways that the Lord uses his unlimited power. Another amazing way that the Lord uses his unlimited power is that he runs in fear of Mother Yasoda. He's the one that even death personified is intimidated by. Even death personified runs away out of fear of Krishna, but Krishna runs away out of fear of being punished by Mother Yasoda. And it's described so enchantingly how the cudgel, the black smudge marks underneath Krishna's eyes are smeared by the tears running from his eyes out of fear while he's running from Mother Yasoda. And this entire month, we sing the 8 prayers of the Dhammastakam, celebrating and worshiping and glorifying the Lord for having run. He who strikes fear into the heart of fear personified. We celebrate the fact that he himself runs away out of fear of Mother Yasoda. We were reading the Krishna book last night as well, how Nanda Maharaj has these wooden slippers. And Krishna shows his devotion to his father as a little toddler by bringing the slippers. Nanda Maharaj says, Krishna, can you bring my slippers? Krishna, the same Krishna who lifted Govardhan Hill, a huge mountain, on the little finger of his left hand and held it as a shelter for all the inhabitants of Vrindavan and cows for 7 days. The same Krishna, he's having trouble bringing the wooden shoes of his father. He puts them on his head and balances them, brings them very, very tenuously across the room to deposit them at the feet of his father. Who can understand that the same personality who lifted Govardhan Hill is navigating very painstakingly the portage of his father's shoes across the room? This is also Aishcharya Kamane. And there are more instances also when Indra was pouring rain, again citing the example of Govardhan Hill. Who would think of lifting a hill and holding it as an umbrella, using a hill as an umbrella underneath which cows and inhabitants could shelter from the rain? It's described that not only were they dry coming in under the shelter of the hill, but they were warm as well, where all around them temperatures had dropped to freezing and flooding was happening. The whole area was being soaked, saturated, and yet it was dry under the hill. It was warm, comfortable. There was no suffering whatsoever on the part of the inhabitants, even though devastation was circumventing their little oasis there underneath the hill. What an unusual way of dealing with the situation. Krishna reveals briefly in the Krishna book that he admits that his first thought when he saw Indra up to shenanigans and trying to drown Vrindavan, Krishna privately, in an aside, you might say, he says that his first thought was to just annihilate the whole heavenly planets, just, just, just destroy, just bring about cosmic destruction to Indra and all of his planets. And then Krishna thought, well, maybe there's a more interesting way and more instructional way to bring about, to curb Indra's anger. And so he came upon this extremely interesting and unpredictable method of protecting the inhabitants of Vrindavan by lifting the Govardhan hill. This is also never heard of in the history of human society. There's no other story. I dare you, challenge you to present another story where someone held up a mountain. You're probably thinking of Atlas holding up the globe, but yet look at poor Atlas. He's staggering under the weight of the planet. He's not having a fun time of it. It looks like there's nothing he'd rather do than drop it, like those big weightlifters. They get this weight up and then they step back and they drop it. So Atlas is hardly a good example to cite because he's struggling under the effort and looks like he's mood is the sooner I get this off of my shoulders, the better. Whereas Krishna wasn't struggling at all. He wasn't straining or grunting. He wasn't bowed over. He wasn't bent with the weight of the mountain on his shoulders. He was just holding it on the little finger of his left hand, as lightly and as effortlessly as described as a child would hold a mushroom up above. So never before in annals of mythology or folklore or narrative literature have we ever read of such an instance where someone lifted a mountain on the little finger of their left hand and held it aloof. Another example, anticipating pralaya, a devastation, Indra tried to devastate with water. He was unsuccessful because of the intervention of Krishna, but there is cosmic devastation that appears regularly, appears on schedule. It's part of the universal cycle of things. Krishna doesn't interfere with that. So there are periods of devastation in which water is the method. There are other periods of devastation where fire is used. But prior to one cosmic devastation, in which there was going to be flooding, the Lord appeared from I don't know. He appeared, Hiranyaksha appeared from the nostril of Brahma. I'm not sure where. I think Shayambhuva just originally, I'm not sure if the Matsya, the fish incarnation, also appeared from the nostril of the Manu, Shayambhuva Manu. And anyway, I forget exactly how he appeared, but very microscopic, very infinitesimal. It might have been that Shayambhuva Manu was walking by a small body of water. And then this little fish called out to him because the fish was growing. It started out microscopic, the fish was growing. So the story is that the fish made a connection with Swayambhuva Manu, was able to communicate with him, and the fish was outgrowing various reservoirs. He prevailed upon Swayambhuva Manu to take him initially from a small puddle and put him in a slightly bigger pond. We had rainfall just the other day, and there's little puddles here and there. And so initially, the fish incarnation, Matsya asked Manu to put him, he'd outgrown this small puddle, so put him in a little bigger puddle. And then no sooner had Manu put him in a little puddle than he'd outgrown that little puddle. He'd gotten bigger. And so then he put him in a pond, a little fish pond. He'd outgrown that. So then Shayambuddha Manu then put him in a lake, and in the twinkling of an eye, he'd outgrown the lake. And then Shayambuddha Manu, the only place he could think to put him was in the ocean. And after putting him in the ocean, then Matsya told Shayambuddha Manu what his mission had been. It was to save the Vedas, the Vedic scriptures, as well as different samples of the various species, so they could reproduce after the recession of the flood. Well, Matsya, when he reached this gigantic form as a fish, he instructed Manu to tie a boat around the horn that happened to be on his head, put all of his possessions, his relatives, as well as various samples of the species, and particularly the Vedas, onto his horn. So the rain came afterwards, and just like it's described in the Bible, the flood and the story of the ark. This is undoubtedly the origin of that story. In this case, as well as the case we described yesterday, where the Lord appeared from the nostril of Brahma, he goes in like a needle and he comes out like a plow. He comes out of the nostril as a small little boar and grows and grows and grows. He also comes out from Shayambhuva Manu as a small little fish, and he grows and he grows and he grows and he grows. We also recall that he appeared before Bali Maharaj as a little dwarf Brahmin, as Vamana the dwarf Brahmin asked Bali Maharaj to donate to him only 3 steps of land, after which he covered the earth, the universe, and finally Bali Maharaj's head with his 3rd step. Now, in each one, what these 3 stories have in common is that the Lord goes in like a needle. He comes in a barely noticeable, certainly he comes in a very unthreatening way, but then he grows and he grows and he grows, and he ends up doing something cosmic, something universal, something that we glorify and celebrate thousands and thousands and thousands of years later. And all this falls under the category of Aishcharya Karmani. You can't predict the demons and the rascals, the Rakshasas. They can create various disturbances in the universal order. And Krishna's appealed to by the demigods to keep things proper, the demigods above, the demons below, the righteous be rewarded, the unrighteous be punished. And sometimes things get out of balance, and the Lord is the one who's approach to redress the situation. But he never does it in a way that's anticipated. You can imagine when the demigods appeal to Vishnu at the ocean of milk, they complain about this or that demon. They complain about his tactics, his strategy, and they can't help but have a certain remedial measures in mind. They can't help but imagine that the Lord is going to do A, B, C, and D in order to rectify the situation. And the Lord never does that. He can never be outguessed. He could never be predicted. He can never be estimated. Now, some people say this proves impersonalism. The Lord has no name, no form, no attributes. He has no actions that can be compared to anything in history. We don't have any reference for someone who started as a little tiny guppy and ended up living in the ocean. We don't have any reference for a boar that came from the creator of the universe's nose and ended up dislodging the orbit, the trajectory of the Earth, and casting it down into the lower planetary systems. We don't have any precedents for these things. And the impersonalists would say this argues impersonalism, that the Lord has no attributes, no name, no form, and so on and so forth. It's all a question of devotion. Hiranmayena Patrina Sasipim Tattvam Darshan Bhavana Satya Dharmaya Vishe. One devotee prays, Lord, um, I understand you as a person in your highest form. You're neither the impersonal, energy-filled Brahman, nor are you the localized Paramatma within the heart, but you are ultimately in your highest feature, Bhagavan. And I realize that the only way I can get your darshan is through devotion, not through scholarship, not through yoga, not through penances, not through austerity, not through philanthropy, not through charity, but only by devoting myself to you. And by your grace, when such a time as you deem it suitable, you will reveal yourself to me, only through devotion. So in the meantime, being tuned in a devotional mood, devotees can intimate the presence of the Lord behind these wonderful incarnations. When Nrsingadev appeared, even the demigods, their minds were upset, their minds were turbulent, their minds were disoriented by the fierce half man, half lion feature of Nrsingadev. And his roaring just like was like a force in and of itself, threatening to break the eardrums, dislodge the planets from outer space, and disrupt the waves and tides in the ocean. All of this was just too much. It was sensory overload, even for the demigods, but not for Prahlad, because Prahlad had devotion. He recognized that behind this most ferocious figure was his dearmost friend. This is none other than Krishna. I heard a story about, in fact, Nrsinga Chaturdasi was approaching in a town in India, and the kids had been preparing a drama for the Nrsinga play, and one of the fathers of the kids had agreed to play the role of Nrsinga. So for a rehearsal, he put on a mask and he put on a fur coat. He had claws and all. He still had jeans and t-shirts underneath, but he was testing out the costume. When the dad came before the younger son with the lion's head and the costume, the younger son began to cry and run away in terror, even after the father took off the mask. It said, son, it's just me. I'm just wearing a costume. The child still couldn't be pacified. He was so panic stricken that he wasn't able to think clearly, rationally. In all of this, the older son was smiling from beginning to end. He wasn't fooled. He knew that this ferocious, lion form was really just his father in a costume. Similarly, the demigods, they're like the younger son. Um, they didn't have the level of devotion, the level of knowledge, the level of maturity that Prahlad had. Even though Prahlad was only a 5-year-old boy, in this scenario, Prahlad is the grown-up one, and the demigods are like the younger sons. Demigods got confused when Krishna came in the mask of Nrsingadev and started roaring and threatening to dissolve the universe. However, Prahlad acted differently. Whereas the demigods were cowering and trembling in terror, Prahlad smiled. And whereas the demigods were running away, or at least keeping their distance away from the Lord, Prahlad walked right up. And he addressed the Lord. He said, Lord, you may strike terror into the three worlds, but not me. I know that behind the mask is you, my friend, my savior. I'm not intimidated or terrorized by this ferocious appearance of the Lord. He's retired now, but Rod Jackman used to teach up at Mountain View High School, right there on Center Street in Orem. Many years, year after year, he was awarded the Teacher of the Year for all of the state of Utah. Very dynamic, expert, wonderful teacher. And he used to invite me a couple times a year into his classrooms. It was always a blast. It was always fun. But I remember one time he'd come by the temple and he bought this big picture of Nrsingadev. the most Gora, the most ghastly one, where he's got intestines hanging out, specks of blood, and his whiskers and everything, and he's crying. So after one presentation before his students, Rod said, "I want to show you something." He had a little office, very, very small, almost like a closet, off of one of his classrooms. So he took me in, and he had this big picture of Nrsimhadev on the wall. He said, "This is what I do when kids are misbehaving." Said, he said, "I lock them in this room. I make them sit in this room for an hour, right in front of this picture of Nrsimhadev." He said, "It always works. They always behave after this experience. They get so intimidated. They stand down after spending 45 minutes with this picture of Nrsimhadev in their office that I can count on them behaving for at least a couple more weeks after that." Nayasha deva rishyam paramaru jantam punundi koriyati yashavataram nashatiram daratya kamahasam. Elsewhere earlier, and we discussed this a few weeks ago, Gajendra described the Lord as an actor. Actor may appear on stage, and due to the makeup, due to a feigned accent or pitch in his voice that he may alter, due to the character that he's playing, the gender that he's playing, the era. It may be something medieval, it may be something modern, maybe something antique. The actor is unrecognizable, even to his sisters and brothers and parents on many occasions. Similarly, Krishna is often described as an actor who appears on stage, and his makeup is so expert, the tone of his voice is so expert, he portrays the role so expert. Krishna is expert, whatever he does, whether it's musical instruments or communicating or fighting, whatever, or driving the chariot, whatever Krishna does is by definition expert. But when he plays a role, such as he does with Nrsimhadev, Matsya, Korma, Vamanadev, Rama, he plays that role to perfection. Krishna has essentially and primarily 10 major roles he plays. Those are the 10 avatars, the Das avatars, and different devotees are attracted to different avatars. Behind the avatar, they see the sweet two-armed, raven-haired, lotus-eyed Krishna. They see Krishna behind the ferocious form of Nrsimhadev. Others see Ramachandra as behind the various incarnations. Krishna has multiple forms to attract different mood and categories and temperaments of devotees. That's why Krishna consciousness is not ultimately impersonal. Krishna doesn't have a predestined, a set list of qualities because he's unlimited. There's no limit to his beauty. There's no limit to his fame. There's no limit to his wealth. There's no limit to his knowledge. So he can't be compared to any ordinary person, all of whom have limits. And that's why it said the Lord has no birth, he has no activities, he has no qualities, he has no name. Because his names are unlimited, his qualities are unlimited, his birth is unlimited. And the prime reason why Krishna is so unlimited is because he has expanded himself. The one original personality of God has expanded himself into millions and millions of parts and parcels, and each and every one of them is unique. There's no such thing as two people being carbon copies of each other. And then the Lord enters into their hearts and he intimates what their unique individuality is. All of this variety has no origin other than Krishna. And yet, although Krishna is one, he becomes many. Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadam, Anantarupam. Then the Lord, having created millions of unique individuals, then he tailors himself. He has no form, he has no name, he has no activities, because his name, form, and activities, each and every one are tailored individually to each and every single devotee. And that's why some devotees prefer the fish, some prefer Ram, some prefer Krishna, some prefer Matsya, some prefer Vamanadev, because of the unlimited variety of which Krishna is the source. One thing that's across the boards with all of Krishna's reciprocation with his devotees is that the Krishna pastimes, above and beyond any other Vishnu incarnations or any of the other 10 avatars, the Krishna pastimes are Lila Vihari. Those pastimes contain a level of sweetness that no other relationships contain. And therefore, it said in the 10th canto of the Bhagavad Nirvita Tarshira Bhagiyamana Bhavoshodacha Ka Tamashoku Punam Bharajita Vinavishikshad. The liberated souls, the souls that have already transcended wealth, fame, material opulence, influence, those who have put all those things behind them since a long time ago, they sing the glories of the Lord. They sing the glories of the Lord, relishing the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes. And not only the liberated souls derive great satisfaction and pleasure from churning the glories of the Lord in their mouths, but those who are not liberated, who aspire for liberation, it is said that this Krishna Katha, these topics about Krishna, are the Austerity. They are the medicine to free one from repeated birth, death, disease, and old age. So for the liberated, they just enjoy the Katha for itself, for what it is. And for those not liberated, the Katha acts as medicine. And for those who are not interested in liberation, still Krishna Katha will satisfy them, because all they really want is superficial entertainment. They want to hear about some love affairs, some battles, some palace conspiracies. They want a plot. They want suspense. They want drama. Oh, pastimes of Krishna supply all of that as well. Even if one is just superficially looking to be entertained, Krishna pastimes, name, form, cause of Krishna will satisfy all classification of men. Those who want to hear about mundane romance, the interaction between male and female, those who want action and adventure. If you go on Prime, that's a source for movies and all for downloading. You'll see there's action adventure, there's romance, there's comedy, there's sports, there's documentaries, there's in every category, Krishna holds attraction for all classes of men. Particularly, we recall that Gajendra approached the Lord not for any transcendental purpose, but just to get free from the bite of the crocodile. Dhruva Maharaj approached the Lord not for any transcendental purpose, but just to get his inheritance back, to redress the wrong of being deprived from his inheritance. And Krishna granted their wishes. He granted their wishes beyond anything they could think or imagine. He said to Dhruva Maharaj, because you've worshipped me without offenses and pretenses, your wish is granted. Over a kingdom greater than your father's you shall reign, the North Star shining brightly above this world of pain. Dhruva, the pole star, a symbol above of unwavering faith and boundless love. His story echoes a lesson so clear: when darkness surrounds, conquer your fear. So when you feel small, like your dreams are denied, just remember young Dhruva and let his light be your guide to do what's right, word up, beacon of might. Focus your heart, let your ambition take flight. You can rise up and become a shining light. Dhruva the legend, his name still inspires a testimony of faith that fuels our inner fires. Let's raise our voices and sing his praises as one. Dhruva's journey reminds us victory can be won. So Dhruva just wanted something totally mundane, and Krishna rewarded him. He supersized what he wanted. He only wanted his father's kingdom. Instead, the Lord gave him the pole star, a star which is not annihilated at the time of cosmic annihilation. And over and above that, he awarded Dhruva a spiritual body. That wasn't anything that Dhruva had conceived of. That wasn't the reason why he started to worship Krishna. And yet that's where he ended up, because that's the nature of Krishna. Krishna always uplifts. He always gives more than you could possibly want or imagine. Gajendra also, all he wanted was to get out of that water and get back to his erotic interaction with his wives and to have his children around him. He wanted to just get back to his life of sensual enjoyment. Krishna fulfilled his desire, cut the crocodile's head from his body, allowed Gajendra to achieve dry land again. But by this time, Gajendra was no longer interested in maintaining his body. By this time, Gajendra had achieved light to such a degree that he said to Krishna, I don't want to live. Krishna had just saved him, ensured that he could continue on in that body. And now Gajendra said, I have no interest in that. That's why I originally approached you. But in the course of this ordeal, in the course of this experience, you have very, very kindly relieved me of my attachment to this dull elephant's body. And now I want to give up the body and I want to resume devotional service in a suitable form. And whatever your motive, go to Krishna. It says, Yavan artu dapane, tavan sarva whatever purposes that can be served by the little small reservoirs of water will all be served by the lake. So why go to this demigod or that demigod or that demigod or this boss or this celebrity or this politician when Krishna is the lake, he's the reservoir, he can supply everything. It is said that Krishna bridges the gap between the bogi and the yogi. Ka shota mano virama. He entertains the ears even of those who are enthusiastic. So everybody can relate to the pastimes of the Lord with one exception. The only one amongst all these different classifications of men who is completely unmoved, averse, in fact, to hearing the pastimes of the Lord is the killer of his own soul. Who is the killer of his own soul? That's the meat eater. Every time you kill another animal, a sentient, living being, just to stimulate the taste buds on your tongue, when you perform that abomination or you enable that abomination be done so you can have a piece of meat or a hamburger on your plate, that kills your own soul as you kill others for pleasure and to satisfy your appetite. Every time you kill another living being, another lamb, another pig, especially another cow, another chicken, you're killing your own soul. And therefore, your heart becomes hard. Your heart becomes cold. You can no longer resonate with the beautiful sublimity of Krishna's pastime. Otherwise, short of that, anyone can be attracted. One time there was a story, devotee had left the movement and they hadn't heard about him for some time. And his name came up in conversation. Someone said, oh yeah, I bumped into so-and-so. We had a little conversation. He'd been out of the movement for a few years. And the devotee who was narrating this, the Prabhupada mentioned that he's no longer a devotee. Prabhupada said, no, of course he's a devotee. Well, Prabhupada, he left ISKCON 5 or 6 years ago. He hasn't even been to the temple. Prabhupada said, ask one question. In your conversation, did he tell you he's still a vegetarian? Did he mention that he has not gone back to eating meat? And the boy said, yes, as a matter of fact, he told me that he's still a vegetarian. Then Prabhupada said, then he's still a devotee. This was the line. This was the line. Until one crossed that line, until one crossed the line and goes back to eating meat, one is considered a devotee. Almost anything can be forgiven except eating meat, because eating meat makes you insensitive to spirit. It makes you unable to intimate the presence of spirit. Examples given, gold, there might be a fortune of gold lying right under your feet. There are said to be gold mines in the Wasatch Mountains just to the east of us here. So you could literally be standing on tens of millions of dollars worth of gold and be totally unaware of it. You have to have the training. You have to have the geological background. You have to have the equipment. And what happens after you follow a particular discipline for some time, like medicine or law or prospecting, geology, whatever it may be, looking for oil, you get a certain intuition. It's nothing you can explain, but you just feel very strongly that there's gold here. And then you do your research and it seems to support your intuition, but it starts with intuition. After all, why would you pick a certain place to check it out, to do the research and development, unless it started with intuition? And that comes after long practice in a particular discipline. And so it's explained that as long as you're not eating meat, as long as you're not killing your own soul by killing others, you can intuit the soul within your own body. Just like a geologist can feel very strongly there's gold here. So similarly, as long as one is not across the line of being a killer of animals, especially of cows, one can easily understand without a lot of extraneous endeavor or a lot of mental power that one is a spirit soul. So it's very important what you eat, because you are what you eat. If you eat meat and flesh and cause unnecessary pain and suffering, then you become dull-headed. You become thick, just like the beef cows that are out in the field that you disrespect and that you victimize. You become just like them. And therefore, and in fact, they were meat eaters in their past life, by the way. So, but essentially, with that one exception, Krishna consciousness will satisfy the desires of anyone, even materialistic people. Now, I'll tell you a story. It's not very flattering. When we were devotees in Australia, we didn't really, we just were starting out in devotional life and still finding out almost every day new things about devotional service. We didn't have any older devotees to mentor us or to guide us. We just kind of bouncing around, figuring out things on our own. We did know that Prabhupada wanted a lot of books to be distributed. So, being sincere, but at the same time rather crude, we went out, we got a shipment of paperback Krishna books. And we went out, and at that time we were wearing pants and coats to blend in more with people. And so the devotees, I don't know who it was, I think it was Buddhi Manta or Gopi Kanta, there was a censor, there was a fellow whose name was known to everybody. His name was Chips, and he was the censor. He decided what material, printed material, was imported into the country. If it was too pornographic or too revealing or too raucous, he would ban it. He wouldn't let it come into the country. Devotees, this is not very flattering. The devotees would open the Krishna book and they would show the rasa dance, Krishna dancing below the gopis. And they would look here and there to make sure, and they would say, like, very, very confidentially, says, we don't know how this one got past Chips. There's some juicy stuff in here that Chips, the censor, might have wanted to have kept out. I warned you, this was not our highest moment, but we sold a lot. They sold a lot of Krishna books with this line, we don't know how this got past Chips, take it before he changes his mind. So a lot of Krishna books went out to materialistic people who are looking for, well, whatever they were looking for. The literature of Krishna, the personality of Krishna, bridges the gap between those who want to stay in this material world, who have no interest in transcendence, and those who want to get out of this material world. Therefore, it says, Nivrita Tarshira Upagiyaman Bhavo Shoda. It's nectar. It's the very life itself for those who are already liberated. It is Bhavo Shoda. It is an ocean of medicine for those who aspire to be purified and come to the liberated taste. And if needs be, it's entertainment for those people who literally want to stay into this material world. So every class of men, except possibly the meat eater, will get something out of Krishna pastimes. That is all the time that we have today. And I noticed out of the corner of my left eye that Brett has been productive this morning. So let's take a look at it here. Not Brett, sorry. Vallabha Chandra, excuse me. Lila was the first one to jump on, shortly followed by Brett. I was a little late because the internet connection wasn't working. Facebook wasn't connecting to Zoom. My Bobby says, Diwali Ki Jai. We are officially celebrating. The temple behind me is the Salt Lake Center. That's not Spanish Fork. That's a beautiful temple by Bobby built in Salt Lake City, and that will be the site of our Diwali / Govardhan Puja celebrations this coming Saturday, starting at 6 o'clock. So here's something from Vallabha Chandra. The loving adventures of Krishna abound. He turned the Aghasura demon into a playground and kept his whole village from being drowned. Even let himself by Mother Yasoda be bound. The lessons to be learned from these pastimes are profound, but we can only really access them through transcendental sound. Wow, beautiful. The loving adventures of Krishna abound. He turned the Aghasura demon into a playground and kept his whole village from being drowned. He even let himself by Mother Yasoda be bound. The lessons to be learned from these pastimes are profound, but we can only really access them through transcendental sound. Beautiful, beautiful. No Shil Mehta joined us. Unfamiliar name, could be his first time. Gives us the Hare Krishna as well as the thought that Krishna is infinite. And here's more from Chaitanya Vallabha Chandra. You can try to gain liberation by scholarship or austerity, or you can try to gain salvation through acts of philanthropy or charity. You can even try to buy freedom with riches and prosperity, but the darshan of the Lord only comes from devotion born out of sincerity. You can try to gain liberation by scholarship or austerity, or you can try to gain salvation through acts of philanthropy or charity. You can even try to buy freedom with riches and prosperity, but the darshan of the Lord only comes from devotion born of sincerity. Right to the point. Kelly, Hare Krishna Kelly from Idaho. No, Shil says every living creature has a right to live peacefully. It's a grave sin to take any living creature's life. Indeed, we would concur with that. He also says, the book Bhagavad Gita, as it is, has taught me to live wisely and peacefully. It is an amazing literature. Lila, thank you for taking the time to share with us. Thank you for joining us. This has been Wisdom Wednesday. That concludes our session of 3 discussions this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Some of you will see on the weekend at the Diwali festivals, Salt Lake City Temple. Should be quite a crowd there, up to 1,000 people. I wouldn't be surprised. Otherwise, keep chanting. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.